So, a global pandemic which brought about some hypergrowth and remote work. Then the macro turned on us, forcing people back into office and the end of the zero interest rate era. Hype cycles from crypto to Gen AI. And all this interspersed with wars around the world. My dear friends and colleagues, please look around you. Look at the person next to you. Give them a nod. Give them a smile. We've had a rough few years, and the last one's been a real doozy. And the worst is, it may not be the end. It may be even just the beginning. And you're probably wondering, great, what a way to start this conference. What a way to start today. But bear with me for a wee bit longer. I'm Smruti Patel, and while my sunny California self is definitely not used to this cold, cold Berlin winter, I've most definitely been leading teams through chaotic winters and change for the last 2+ decades. Going all the way back to the year 2000, when I decided to make a bet on computer science, because I was stoked about this mission to bring in digital transformation that would change how humans live their lives. Finished my bachelor's, moved to America to pursue a master's, and joined VMware, which was at the helm of virtualization back in the day. It was still an underdog compared to the Microsofts of the world. And then came 2008. First came the headcount cuts, then came cuts in travel and benefits, and finally went the avocados from Taco Tuesdays. And you know, when the avocados are gone, shit's truly hitting the fan. And so I too had a choice whether to be a staff IC or whether to become an engineering manager. And by then I had realized that what I loved doing a lot was bringing a diverse set of people together to solve hard, challenging problems. And I haven't looked back since. For a decade plus, built and led teams. And fast forward to 2022, my first time as an official executive, I joined Apollo. And 3 weeks in, the exec team and I had to make a very hard decision. We had to conduct a reduction in force, or a layoff, as they say. And it was a time when I barely had time to build trust with my teams. And so I leaned in. I leaned in heavily into what makes me me. Honesty, integrity, empathy, and treating humans humanely and with respect. And so not once or twice, but at least thrice, I've had to tune in and adapt. And through these, I've made several mistakes, I've learned lessons, and here's what I've seen. Every upcycle comes with a down. They last for different periods. Traditionally, the upcycle lasts longer than the down times. And they both have some marked differences. In the up times, money is almost free. So you see a lot of the zero interest rates. Time then becomes money. And the opportunity cost for a company to not go after that user base or that new market segment becomes egregiously high. This then determines what the company chooses to spend its most valuable resource on, its engineering bandwidth. It adopts this dandelion-like strategy for innovation. It sows many seeds, makes many bets. And so even if most don't pan out, but a few do, the upside is very high for the company. And as a result, the demand for high-caliber engineering talent is very high. And we see engineering orgs rapidly growing. And so also are individuals, on the traditional vectors of growth: name, fame, title, compensation. Now contrast that to the down times when interest rates are high. Getting capital is very, very expensive for companies. And cash becomes king. So companies are trying to save costs. They're trying to save money. And so they get very intentional about what their core focus is going to be on. They're very strategic, intentional, and thoughtful about what bets they choose to make. They follow almost an elephant-like strategy for innovation. They're trying to do more with less, and as a result, you see engineering orgs either shrinking or staying steady at best. And so what I've noticed is the upcycle almost forgives all sins. But in the down times, every small mistake or even every good investment you make has a huge amplification factor. In fact, a recent study of the last 3 global recessions, it showed that companies which did cost cutting at all costs, whether it was firing key staff, following process or material efficiencies, or being very laser focused on just one big thing, actually crushed their competitive chances when things got better. Another study showed how happy, engaged employees had better outcomes to business in worse times than they actually did in good times. And so when we think about culture, we know that culture is made when the going gets rough. And lack of transparency, clarity, and low trust can actually cause rampant fight or flight responses and erode that natural psychological safety, something that is very crucial to how humans do their best work. And all of this then creates this downward spiral of low morale, low performance concerns, low organizational productivity, and just terrible business outcomes and outcomes for your users. And so as engineering managers, as leaders, how should we be thinking about navigating growth in these downtimes? And this is where I've read about this beautiful analogy. I love hiking, and in California, you see a lot of these. You see the eucalyptus trees and you see the oak trees. Now, what is very interesting is they both have very, very different growth strategies. The eucalyptus tree grows tall and it grows quickly, crowding out all others in favorable conditions. But it also tends to be brittle as a result. And contrast this to the oak. The oak grows slowly, it grows deliberately, and so it grows broad and strong. Now, the thing to note is neither is a winning strategy in and of itself. You see a lot of both eucalyptus trees and oak trees. It's a lot about the environmental conditions that these are surrounded by. And so take our tech. We've seen a decade and more of hypergrowth. And to do that, now times have changed. It starts with acknowledging that it's okay to feel what we are feeling. It's okay to feel this fear, this uncertainty, this chaos, this confusion. But know that you are not in this alone. We're all in this together to learn from each other and to support each other. And the good news is by focusing on a few key concepts, you can build a primer which brings in adaptability and resilience into how we lead our teams through this chaos and into enduring, sustaining growth. And having gone through about 3 of these downturns, today I'll share with you my framework for how do you go from growth at all costs into enduring, sustaining growth. Starting from your own self and doing a mindset shift to driving compounding impact for your users and your business. And then connecting the why and the what to the how, which is unlocking true performance and potential for your teams, both individually and collectively. And through it all, how do we foster this culture of deep empathy, engagement, and efficiency? So let's dive right in. So when COVID hit, I was at Stripe. I was leading data platform, which was key infrastructure and services for Stripe's mission-critical business transaction processing for our users. And over 1.5 years, I grew this group from 20 to 200 through active hiring and through intentional org design. Now, contrast this with my time at Apollo, where when I started off, I had to start with a reduction in key engineering bandwidth. I had to drastically shift my mindset to adapt to these very, very different environmental conditions. And so if my role during hypergrowth was that of a builder, building one brick at a time, building a skyscraper, building on a solid, steady foundation, because headcount flowed freely, and my focus was on hiring the next engineer, building the next team, pursuing the next opportunity for our users, solving the next hard problem. But then things changed. My role evolved to that of being a gardener in the downtimes, tilling the soil, sowing the right seed, nurturing the right plant, taking the weeds out intentionally, and maybe awaiting the first bloom. The thing to note here is a gardener inherently has this scarcity mindset. They're very aware that resources are finite, whether it's your water or your nutrients. And they're also very, very in tune with the environmental conditions that they're surrounded by, things like weather or the soil. And so going from builder to gardener essentially hinges on 3 guiding principles. It starts and begins with survival. What is it going to take to survive? Your team is looking to you in how you show up. So are you having a bad day and finding it hard to show up the way your team wants you to? Then take the day off. Don't be a hero. Manage your own burnout. Be aware of what brings you excitement, what brings you joy. Be aware of things that are draining you so you can manage your exhaustion. You can also lean in to create a support network with other leaders. Pat talked about the leadership Voltron. Build one so you can lean in and support each other through times like these. Because even neuroscience tells us that when we're operating out of fear, we're not doing the best work of our lives. So once you've figured out survival, how do you then go to start thriving, moving into reward mode? This is all about taking this time as an opportunity to hone our skills and to get better at what we do. It's asking ourselves, what might I learn from this experience? What is going to be good about this a year from now, maybe 3 years from now? And a lot of survival takes moving from playing in easy mode to playing in hard mode. And hard mode is hard. I remember back in 2009, the first layoff conversation I'd had to have. It was with an engineer I had helped hire who'd just become a new dad. I relayed the news to them. I went to the bathroom and bawled my eyes out. For another project, the team had been working on for 2+ years, and we had to decide to can it because we didn't have the budget to see it through completion. Now, these are hard conversations to have. But the only way we as leaders can take our teams through these hard times, help our teams understand and contextualize the why behind all this that's happening, it requires us to be in tune with our emotions, our thoughts, our securities, our insecurities, and then show up in that true, authentic way. I have this practice with my team Monday morning, 8 o'clock. We go around the room asking ourselves, how are we really doing? Because what I found is when I say, hey, how are you doing? The first answer is like, good. But the third really nails it in and helps you tune in to how not only are you feeling, but how you can lean in to support the team around you. Because how we show up has always mattered, but it matters even more so now. And so starting with your own self, adapting to being a gardener with a scarcity mindset, one that hinges on survival and playing in hard mode, you start leading with empathy. And once you've internalized and acknowledged that these changing times need for you to have a different toolkit, the next step on this journey is asking, what does driving results and having compounding impact in times like this look like? What should you and teams be working on? What should you not? As engineers and engineering managers, we in the last decade have enjoyed the zero interest rate. Our focus was not on understanding the business. Our focus was on growing the business, getting more users, shipping more features, churning out more and more. But not today. One of the key Staff ICs on my team asked me during quarterly planning, hey Smruti, should I build a developer portal to manage our deploys, or will you approve of an off-the-shelf offering? Another one said, hey, should I finish my Gen AI project, or do I go solve for cloud costs? So how do we empower our teams to make the decisions with the right guardrails in these times? And the only way we can do that is if we understand the higher order bits of the business. Because the reality is, if your company has 4 quarters of cash in the bank, you are not likely going to start a 2+ year Kubernetes migration today. So it's all about survive and then thrive. And so a few things that are useful here. Think about what the P&L statement for your company looks like, profit and loss. It's a map of the company's operation. It tells you things like, how's your business doing? How is it growing quarter over quarter, year over year? What's the renewal rate of your customers? If you take a look at things like revenue, what percentage of that revenue is coming from landing new customers versus expanding existing customers? Because landing new always takes more time. It takes more effort from your sales team. The good, solid core of a healthy SaaS is the renewal rate of your customers, because it tells you that your product is really doing a good job in retaining existing customers, and so your sales team can operate off a lean, mean schedule. Another one here is cost of revenue. What does it cost to serve the product or the platform or the service that you're offering? Are your cloud costs growing faster than the rate at which you're bringing in money? then maybe you have some leverage to even out the two curves. Once you know what the P&L and the financials look like, the next question to ask is, what's your business strategy? Where is your company trying to get to in the coming year? Is it trying to hit profitability, or is it really low on cash and trying to manage against an aggressive metric like something called cash burn? Or has it cracked the nut and trying to get to a healthy SaaS, which sometimes tracks things like Rule of 40, which is the growth rate plus profit roughly should be greater than or equal to 40%. And so once you've contextualized the P&L and the business strategy, take solace in the fact that economy is cyclical. From Instagram to WhatsApp, from Netflix to Airbnb, from Slack to Zoom, category-defining products and platforms were forged during the last economic crisis. And what this tells us is that creative and empowered engineers and resilient leaders will always rise to the occasion to redefine how the rest of the world lives and thrives. And so as the world recovers, which it always does, how do we set our teams up to drive results and drive that compounding impact? And here comes the second principle where I strongly believe that engineers don't lack motivation. They're here to do their best work. And it's all about what makes each of us tick. When we think about intrinsic motivation, which talks about competence, autonomy, purpose, a lot about this is how can you as a leader stay aligned to the North Star, to the mission, and be very, very intentional about the why. Like, why do you show up and wake up every morning excited about working? Because only when you as a leader can grok this why, this mission, the North Star, can you help your team connect those dots to the day-to-day and the what. So to begin with, start with the why, focus on the North Star, and stay super aligned to the mission, especially in these changing times. It involves asking yourself, with the changing climate, has your business strategy or your product strategy changed? Whom are you now catering to? KYC, who's my user? What problems are they having? How can you best serve them and maximize the value? Because nothing gives you that confidence on, should I expose that extra option to my PaaS, or should I expose a new API? Unless you really talk to 1 to 3 users, have them as your design partners, and aim for that day zero adoption. It also involves asking, what does success look like? Now that I know who my user is, what should I be optimizing for? What targets can I set? What business KPIs do I follow? Are you trying to get more monthly active users? Or have you realized that that P&L showed you that, hey, there's a lot of leverage to drive your cloud costs down? And so the last thing here is driving alignment early and often with your stakeholders, whether they are product management, go-to-market, support. Follow the rule of no surprises. Bring others along so they know they can validate that their business and product strategy is in line with what engineering is planning to deliver. And once you understood the business, you align to the North Star. The last bit is, how do you own the business? What should you and team choose to work on? How do you make those high leverage bets with compounding returns and impact? And here I go back to my Stripe days, which taught me that efficiency is leverage. For every critical project, ask yourself, what is the ROI? What's the return on investment? How can you drive incremental value early and often? Take a look at your KTLO. In hypergrowth, your KTLO that you're accruing is faster than the rate at which you're burning down. Now is the time to take a look at your keep the lights on kind of work, see what burden it falls on engineering, drive engineering efficiency. Revisit your build versus buy rubrics. If you're thinking of building platforms, platforms take time. It takes niche skill set, which you may not have the luxury to go buy or hire for. So consider buying off-the-shelf vendors, things like Apollo's GraphOS, which is the next-gen API platform in a world of microservices. And once you've analyzed the bucket of work that you and team could be thinking to solve, focus on ruthless prioritization and focus. Because if hypergrowth is all about what you're saying yes to, these times are all about what you are intentionally and strategically saying no to. Rethink your opportunities and the bets that you and team are making. And so here you want to drive focus and balance between the short-term tactical stuff and the medium to long-term things, which is going to have that compounding return. And so a lot about doing more with less is about driving more value with less distractions. And to do this, focus on outcomes and results, not so much as focusing on output. And to do that, avoid things like game over situations. You want to cap your downside, because how do you reduce the unknown unknowns in some of the projects you take on? For us, when we looked at our KTLO and we had to reduce it, we realized that we didn't have the luxury for a lift and shift migration. And so we very surgically brought in targeted fix for some areas which were driving high support burden on our engineers. And lastly, align with leadership. What are you saying yes to? What are you saying no to? So there is a rule of no surprises. We have this rule, a practice in fact, of no avocados or no watermelons, which is green on the outside, yellow or red on the inside. And so when you're communicating your project updates, slips in delivery, a shortage of resources, please err on the side of over-communicating so no one's caught surprised. And so understanding the business, being aligned to the North Star, and then truly owning the outcomes helps you drive that compounding impact and efficiency for your business. Once you've anchored on the why and the what, let's focus on the how, the most important thing, our teams and our people. So to lead our teams to drive results and compounding impact, the first thing is how do we bring our teams along on the same journey that we have been, shifting to a scarcity mindset, playing in hard mode, and helping our team contextualize the business and the macro and the financials of our company. And a lot of that starts with creating that clarity, a big part of which is helping your team connect the dots. The why and being aligned to the mission, to the day-to-day what. Remember here, it is a lot about how do you show what good and great look like, whether it's in terms of consistency, accuracy, pace of execution, or the quality of work. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast in these times. And so think about your different projects you might have. You might have a project which is higher priority than your project B. Do you have the right wood behind the right few arrows? So a lot of this is also about driving that continued focus, avoiding priority thrash or priority inversion, and then aligning your team toward that shared objective. Another one here is how do you focus on building high trust, diverse teams which have got higher team morale. Your teams may have merged, they may have split, scope might have moved around. People are generally feeling anxious, like, what is the other shoe, when's it going to drop? So how do you bring people along on this change management journey? And here what I like to practice is do not YOLO the comms. Be very, very thoughtful and intentional to bring people along on the why behind these changes. Give them context on how the shift in business priorities is causing a shift in engineering priorities as well. And lastly, trust but verify. Be very, very rigorous about the guiding principles behind the decision-making framework, not so much as expecting a lot of precision. And here what is then helpful is keeping your feedback loops tight so you can be curious about what the hypothesis is telling you. For us, in one certain area, we saw that the product-led inbound leads had drastically dropped, and the team had started solving for some problems on the fringes, which was the entry portal into the product. And that didn't meet my sniff test. And on deeper investigation, we actually found out that we needed to clean the whole guts out of how we expected our users to onboard onto our Apollo GraphOS platform. So a big part of driving this clarity is showing our teams what good and great look like, trusting the teams to make the right decisions, but also making sure that you have the right feedback loops in place so you can validate the decisions that are being made. On the individual side, how do we grow careers when the business may not be growing? What I like to do is have intentional one-on-one growth conversations with every person on my team to know where they are, not just in their careers, but in their life, and where they want to get to a year or 3 years out. And once you know where someone is in their career trajectory, I like to follow these 4 S's, which is scope, skills, support, and sponsorship. Whom can you give more scope to? Many teams have had to downsize, but scope probably still remain. They had to be shuffled around because the business needs to go. Roles may have shifted. Priorities may have moved around. How can someone flex on these adjacent needs? Whom can you give that more scope to? This is also a great opportunity to delegate. Remember, don't be a hero. Don't firefight. Take a step back. Ask yourself, What kind of work are you doing that you can hand over to someone else? Because it helps them increase their scope, helps them add more skills to their toolkit. Identify people who want to learn and grow and stretch. We had an engineer who knew Java and wanted to pick up Rust. We had a full stack engineer who wanted to learn back-end distributed systems. So how can we create these opportunities and then marry those to the career aspirations that some people have, where they are excited and motivated to learn and grow? And to complement that, for these highly motivated folks, how do you give them the support, the learning resources, whether it's in money or in terms of time? Have something like a hack week where they can spend the time to pick up their skills and they set up to succeed. And lastly, sponsorship. How can you build and extend your network? Because underrepresented folks are over-mentored but under-sponsored. So now's the time to ask yourself, how can you help open up doors, connect the right person to the right opportunity, even if it means that they may not report into you? I like to do something called a recall list, which is an Excel spreadsheet of all the people I've met, and I routinely ping them to see how I can help them, how I can help connect them to another opportunity and open up doors for them. And the last is intentional culture, driving psychological safety when the pie is much smaller. How do you avoid those zero-sum hunger games? And a big part of this is normalizing failures, especially now. It's not so much as maximizing or rather minimizing failures as it is about maximizing what you learn from each failure. And the only way to do that is have your tight feedback loops so you can observe, orient, decide, and then act. Treat every failure as a learning opportunity. At Apollo, growth mindset is one of our key values, and we live and breathe it every day, whether it's an incident postmortems or doing a project retro if the delivery timeline slipped. So each is an opportunity to build a culture of learning and development, and also continuous improvement, because we all know 1% better daily leads to being 37 times better at the end of the year, and that's a lot. So whether it's your KTLO, whether it's your processes, whether it's your product friction, keep chipping away at it so you're driving continuous improvement. And as people are stretching and growing, please, please give them feedback. Remember, feedback is a gift, especially in these times. People are very nervous about how they're doing, what they're doing. And so practice radical candor, clear is kind, so people know not just how they're doing, but areas where they're doing really well and areas they need to get better at. I do want to make a mention of hiring. The cost of a mishire in these times is very, very high, not just for you and the teams, but for the users as well. So make sure you're very intentional about whom you're bringing on board. Assess the opportunities and the problems you got to solve for in the next year to 3 years. And then do things like gap analysis on the team, where you know where your existing team is, and you can find how best to complement them. And once you've done that, make sure you change your hiring loops and your rubrics to actually be in line with the competencies and the signals you're looking for. And build diverse teams. Now is the time to nurture candidates from those underrepresented minorities and build your own recall list if you haven't. In short, focus on team morale, because there's no better time like right now to make your company a great place for the survivors. And not just survivors, but make sure people succeed and thrive. Give them the support, give them the resources, give them the coaching, give them space to do innovation. And so driving clarity, setting expectations, and showing what good and great look like, having those intentional growth conversations and creating that culture is going to help you unlock performance and deep engagement for your teams. So through all this, my biggest takeaways have been: put your own oxygen mask on as and when needed, lead with trust, transparency, and vulnerability, because growth in these times is going to look different for everyone. But this too shall pass, and so build for enduring growth, whether it's your own, your teams, or for your users and the business. You have a lot more agency to bring in change than you think you do. So adapt, but also lean in to find what feels truly authentic to you versus something that's seeping into your moral ethical core. And then use this as a period of great opportunity for conscious leadership, intentional cultures, and driving that transformational impact. Zooming out, growth in a downturn is all about grit, adaptability, and resilience. Shift your mindset to playing in hard survival mode and lead with empathy for yourself, your teams, and your users. Unlock your team's performance and potential to foster that deep engagement, and strive for that compounding impact by driving efficiency for your business and focusing on what you're going to solve for. And so, as an engineering leader, you now have a playbook to lead empowered, effective orgs from this chaos into enduring growth and awaiting your first bloom despite this frost. Thank you.